Hello and welcome. This is your weekly fix. I'm Smita Nair. We may not be in real danger of the classic science fiction trope involving artificial intelligence of a machine rebellion coming true, but rapid strides made in AI over the last several years demand that regulations keep pace. The AI industry is projected to be worth over $15 trillion by 2030. The fear is that not enough debates are happening in our legislative spaces among our policymakers. There isn't enough stakeholder input, and that by the time regulation tries to catch up, the user base of this technology will be so large that any real regulation will become tough, if not impossible. But are our anxieties about AI overblown? Or are we, on the other hand, underestimating the dangers? To get to that, we need clarity on what exactly AI is and does and could potentially do or be. Who better than arguably the preeminent voice in India on artificial intelligence, Dr. Balaraman Ravindran, who heads the Robert Bosch Centre for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence at IIT Madras. Thank you, sir, for making the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Smita, for inviting me to be on this show.
Right. Dr. Ravindran, I'll need you to speak in a language that folks who are not entirely conversant with technology and its workings can understand. So that's a request to you.
Sure. Sure.
Right.
That's fine.
Um, Let us begin with a question that is simple yet fundamental to understanding this whole debate. Now, one sees that algorithm, machine learning, reinforcement learning, and AI are often and perhaps incorrectly used interchangeably. Could you give us clarity on this?
Yeah, so they are incorrectly used interchangeably. There is no question about that. So an algorithm, right, is nothing but a very precise step-by-step specification of how you should do a computation or how you should achieve an end goal. Right? An algorithm did not even be run on a computer. You could write algorithms on pen and paper, and the notion of algorithms goes way beyond. I mean, much before computers were invented. Right? So an algorithm is just a step-by-step specification of how you should go about solving a problem. Right? And artificial intelligence, you could think of them as a class of methods or class of algorithms, if you will, right? That solve problems that been hard for traditional computers to work with. Right? So, in fact, in like maybe 15 years back, I used to ask people, "What do you think is hard for a computer to solve? Playing chess or telling whether a baby is male or female?" Right? It turns out that 15 years back, it was actually harder for a computer to tell the gender of a baby than to play chess. Right? So problems which traditionally computers have had trouble with, or where you need some amount of reasoning, some amount of some amount of cognition, of trying to understand what are the signals that are coming into you from the world, right? So all of these are typically the kind of problems that artificial intelligence algorithms solve. Okay, so the thing with technologies like machine learning and reinforcement learning and so on and so forth, they are a further subclass of artificial intelligence algorithms. So what we normally understand as an algorithm, right, which is like a step-by-step specification of how a problem should be solved, the machine learning and reinforcement learning type of approaches actually give you an algorithm as an output. You tell it, okay, I want you to give me a step-by-step method by which I can recognize whether a baby is male or female. Right? And then what I do to these algorithms is give a lot of examples. Here are 10,000 babies that are male. Here are another 10,000 babies that are female. Now, from these examples, can you figure out a mechanism by which, given a new baby picture, I'll be able to tell you whether it is male or female. Right? So these are the kind of problems that machine learning approaches solve. Right? So in some sense, you have taken a very large notion, which is algorithms, and kind of confused it with AI, right? Which is a very special class of algorithms that try to solve problems that humans are traditionally good at, but not machines. And now machines are getting better and better than humans at solving these problems, thanks to thanks to the AI approaches, right? And then within that, you have subclass of algorithms called as machine learning algorithms, and another subclass called reinforcement learning, which kind of take examples, take not necessarily a step-by-step specification of how to solve the problem, but take examples of what the problem should do, right? What the solution should do, and then come up with the step-by-step specification for solving it. So that's basically the kind of differences between the terms that you use. And so AI, unfortunately, has come to mean recently mostly this kind of machine learning kind of approaches, but the field of AI is much larger than that, and there are lot more work that has happened in the field of AI. So I'll stop here, and perhaps as you ask me more questions, I can get back and expand on some
Right,
things.
right. So further to that, sir, can AI? I think this comes to the application of AI. Now, can AI be broadly split into what I read is narrow AI and artificial general intelligence? Could you explain to our viewers the uses of these two and this artificial general intelligence? Some are warning can be potentially apocalyptic.
Okay, so I think I don't know if people are just hearing me or just seeing me. That me, I just waved dismissively when you said apocalyptic.
We can see you.
But yeah, so but the point is, narrow AI is essentially AI tailored to solve a specific problem, right? So we have a very well defined end goal, like identifying gender of babies. Okay, gender of babies might seem like a very trivial application, but it could mean things like, you could look at. In fact, there are these amazing AI tools that look at babies and tell you what the temperature of the babies is. Right. So especially when you're talking about premature babies, you don't want to put a temperature sensor on them because it can injure them. So you can just look at the baby's face and say what the temperature is and things like that. So these are basically narrow AI problems. There's a very, very specific goal, and you are building an AI tool, or rather AI based tool, to solve that specific instance. So it's called narrow AI. The AI part comes in primarily because you're using techniques that were developed in the field of artificial intelligence. It's narrow AI. See, artificial general intelligence is by and large used nowadays as a marketing term. Right? So if you go back to the 50s and 60s, when people originally were coining the phrase artificial intelligence, right? Their goal was to understand what was the computational process by which humans exhibit intelligence, right? And try to come up with a systematic way of simulating that experience, that computation. So you have to understand what are the steps, the computation that humans achieve intelligence, or what is known as intelligence, and then come up with a way to simulate them. So that is essentially what the goal of the artificial intelligence community is from the beginning, right? So when you're talking about artificial general intelligence, in popular imagination, it means that a AI system that can act just like humans and learn anything in the world, right? You can teach it to solve any problem in the world, and it's still a far off dream. So we're not close to solving the problem, right? And so yeah, we are nowhere close to. There's no practical artificial general intelligence systems out there. So nowhere
All
close
right.
to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, can you also, Dr. Ravindran, talk now about what has been in the news recently since sort of ChatGPT in
Yeah.
the latter half of 22, specifically about large language models, LLMs?
Yeah.
And again, I'm going by the headlines you see in sort of tech writing, and they're being heralded in some quarters as the thing that will come to define AI. Could you talk about this,
Hope
please?
not. I hope not. So what is a large language model, right? So a large language model essentially takes in a sequence of words or tokens, right, that have already been written or generated, and then tries to predict what is the next token that has to come. Right? It could be that it takes in like 4 lines of poetry and then tries to predict what should be the next few words that has to come. Or it could take in 10 lines of programming language and then try to predict what should be the next few lines of the language, and so on and so forth, right? And of course, writing articles is very clear. It takes in like 2 or 3 sentences or some key phrases and then tries to generate a sentence out of it, right? So language idea of language models is not new, right? Language models have been around for a long time, and all the search engines and all the online tools that you have use language models significantly. With the early translation tools, early language processing tools use this notion of language models. It's basically given a sequence of tokens. Can you predict what should be the next token? Right? So, but then what has happened with the large language models is the volume of data that they have been trained on. So we're not talking about something like 6 trillion tokens that has been trained. Not like thousands, 10,000s, not even billions. Right? We're talking now in order of trillions of tokens that has been trained on. So essentially, what has happened is almost any kind of prompt that you give the software, right? Any kind of prompt that you give ChatGPT, it has some kind of a sensible way to continue the prompt. So remember, I was telling you, you give like 4 or 5 words, and then you see what the next token is, right? So essentially, those 4 or 5 words that you give to the ChatGPT is called a prompt. Right? So because of the variety and volume of training data that ChatGPT has seen, it's able to take these prompts and then start generating the future tokens. So what is missing here? It really does not understand what you are feeding it. It does not understand what it is generating, right? It literally is, parroting sequences or some combination of sequences that it has seen in the past. Right? It is not like it understands irony or it understands, sarcasm and is able to create all these witty prose and things like that. Right? All of this has been done. Somebody has written all of these things, and therefore, when you look at if you have to give it the right trigger. So the trigger sentence, the prompt that you give it has to have some notion of sarcasm. It has to be written in a style that kind of entails sarcasm down the line. And then you will see ChatGPT generating sentences that have sarcasm. If you write in a very dry scientific text, right, then it's going to generate very dry scientific text down the line. Right? So that is essentially what is happening with ChatGPT, and it's mind blowing. I'm not in any way minimizing the contributions or the achievements of ChatGPT. The fact that they have trained a large language model on so many tokens really makes it useful as a tool that you can use in aiding you in creative endeavors, right? So you can write some amount of text and then feed it to ChatGPT and say, can you polish this, can you write this in Indian English, right? And then it'll give you back something that uses Indianisms in that, right? So those kinds of assistive tasks, ChatGPT is great at performing. Right? And of course, you can make it write code. In fact, code is so much easier, like programming is so much easier than writing natural language, because programming is a lot more structured. So, given a few tokens, and I can get it to do the next predictions very easily, right? So, programming is a lot more structured. So, it's not a big surprise that it generates programs. And this is one of the reasons you also see all these, fantastic failures of ChatGPT that are being reported as well, right? Because it doesn't really understand what it is doing. And in fact, putting in notions of what is correct and what is socially acceptable and so on and so forth to ChatGPT as the as the AI tool is very hard, and that is why people like OpenAI have stepped in and have written all these filters and rules, and then say, hey, oh no, I'm not supposed to say anything that is racially sensitive because there are some keywords that trigger it, right? And of course, people keep finding ways to step around this. You can make ChatGPT say something bad about black people or white people, but not about black people, because black as a race is a triggering keyword, so OpenAI catches it. But maybe white as a race is not a triggering keyword, so you can get ChatGPT to say something not so complimentary about. So those are the kinds of things, right? These are all externally done. These are a lot of exceptions that people put in. But as an AI, it is nowhere close to learning these kinds of social conventions. What is right? What is wrong? And so on and so forth. Right? So ChatGPT is a fantastic advancement in AI. It's a great engineering feat, and it's very useful tool. It is here to stay. People are going to find more and more innovative use of using ways of using ChatGPT, and also safe ways of using ChatGPT. But is it anywhere close to addressing the general AGI problem, or is it going to become the defining feature of what is artificial intelligence going forward? I don't think. And
Okay.
there are a lot of people, a lot of AI experts who don't have skin in the game, who are not trying to sell ChatGPT or try to and you can see that in the public discourse as well, right? You can see a lot of people. warning against trusting ChatGPT too much as next. A lot of work to be done to get AGI. Like I said, there are no workers, even with chat.
Right. Uh, Now, Dr. Ravindran, apart from giving us prompts like, when you go on Amazon, people who bought this also bought this, or on YouTube, recommendations on what to watch next, could you help our viewers understand how artificial intelligence is in ways that are perhaps not as obvious to us, aiding or may I say, taking over entirely the role of decision making?
I would say there is very little in terms of completely taking over decision making. There are a lot of areas in which AI has had significant success, and I like to say that AI has had a lot of success in areas where, one, the cost of failure is not high, right? So take an example. Suppose I have Alexa, right, or Google Home, and if Alexa doesn't understand me the first time I say, it's okay with it, right? And I'm happy to repeat it again. Like, these are small failures that are fine, right? So, and in fact, my wife says I always talk in a very much more slower to Alexa than I talk to other human beings. So because these are things where I don't, I say the cost of failure is not very high. And the second thing is, these are areas where I really don't want the system to fail. I'm actually going the extra mile to make sure that the AI system is going to succeed because I like the services that are being offered by the AI system, as opposed to say there is a loan decision making AI where I would really like the AI to fail and give me a loan even though I don't deserve a loan, right? So I mean there are applications of AI where I will try to beat the system. In which case you need a lot more safeguards, right? You need to make sure that there is a human in the loop who can verify that things are the decisions are being made as they should be made, and also that the chain of responsibility is fixed, right? And so there is the liabilities are properly assigned and so on and so forth. There are issues there in areas where the AI decision making is very critical. Failures can have a large cost, and there are people trying to make the AI systems fail. But the places where AI has been very successful or applications like this. So, I mean, we are so. In fact, I understand that voice searchers are now outnumbering text searchers on Google, right? So soon we will be finding that there are more voice. The trend is much faster. Voice searchers are growing much faster, especially in India, than text searchers, right? And in such a turn of events is possible only because the AI is there at a level where it can understand your voice so easily. Right? In fact, my the kids right these days don't think twice before talking to a phone or talking to an Alexa or anything, right? Because they're so used to an AI actually understanding and responding to what they say. Right? And this was something impossible when I was a kid. So there are so many ways in which we are interacting with AI systems around us, and it's not just a question of Amazon's recommendation systems. Or, for example, Google search. Right? Google search uses a lot of AI to personalize the search results for you. Right? In fact, I always jokingly say there is this. There is a machine learning algorithm called the party game algorithm. So
Right.
when I go to Google and search for party game, I get hits about the machine learning algorithm. And when my students go and search for party game algorithm, they get party games. So
Right.
so
Right.
so there is there's some amount of specialization and learning, and there's a whole bunch of these things happen in these, right? And of course, it's not just on Amazon recommendations, right? Twitter, the tweets that you see is I mean there are different Twitter worlds depending on what you have done in the past, right? So
Right.
there is something called academic Twitter, there is this political Twitter, there's a right wing, alt right, everything, right? So depending on what you have done in the past, you see a very very different view of what people are tweeting about, what is hot now, right? So and likewise on Facebook or any news channel that you see, any news recommendation that you see, right? So machine learning algorithms are significantly changing the way we view the world through the digital lens, right? So these are all things that where AI has literally, you know, um, getting into. I mean, at least the use of AI algorithms is getting into some amount of social engineering. So far, we have been thinking that the cost of these things is not very heavy. I mean, if I make a wrong recommendation on tweets, you can just search and find another tweet and so on and so forth. But I feel that a lot more studies need to be done in terms of how how AI is helping in polarizing the worldviews of people and communities, and how AI is setting up things against various communities and so on. So a lot of work that needs to be done in this way. I kind of going away from the question that you asked, but AI is all pervading now, right? So in so many other instances, AI is being used. In fact, healthcare, right? So now, not in India at least. India is still, the price point has not reached a point where I can use AI systems for reading X-ray images. But elsewhere, right, people are using. There are so many companies that are now providing services that allow you to automatically interpret your medical reports and so on and so forth. So those are actually coming into production. Right? And likewise, there's so many drug companies that are using AI algorithms to search for new drug candidates. You can't still with 100% certainty tell you that this drug will work, but instead of looking at 1,000 possibilities, AI lets you look at maybe 100 possibilities.
Dr. Ravindran,
So
I
all
just
this
want
is,
to just want
yeah,
to rewind a bit. You sort of in passing mentioned the use of AI in deciding who should get a loan, for instance.
yeah,
That
sure.
that's is that happening in India? I mean, I haven't heard of it. Is Are banks
Not in India.
employing
Not in India.
AI?
Not in India. Not in India. Not in India.
Okay.
At least banks don't openly say that, even if they are, right. I mean, see, the thing is, that's a very fine line between doing saying something is algorithmic, like algorithmic trading, and saying that we are using AI. Right? So some of these algorithmic techniques could potentially, or automated techniques, automation techniques could potentially be using some amount of AI in there, AI derived techniques, but they don't have to be declared per se, right? So we don't have any regulations about having to disclose whether you are using AI or not in your decision making in your technology and things like that. So that is still a very gray area. So we don't know for sure if whether banks are using AI for making loan decisions and things like that. I would be surprised if some of the multinationals don't have some AI in their decision making process. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of these people, whether in India or internationally, are letting an AI make decisions completely. They use them as decision support systems where they actually, instead of looking at 10 different factors, maybe these are the two things you should look at. So those kinds of, making it much more efficient for the human being to make decisions so that you can actually process a lot more applications in a day. But I don't think anyone has come to the point where they are happy to hand over the decision making completely to an AI system.
Right. I wanted to move on to the question of bias, but again, you mentioned, and I would really like for you to expand on it, the fear that you expressed or the anxiety that you said is real over AI, causing more sort of fissures in by the use by disinformation, I suppose, is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
And you said
it's not
confirmation bias.
disinformation. It is
Right.
not this confirmation bias, but not disinformation per se,
Okay.
right? I
Confirmation
mean,
biases.
there are two sides to every issue, more at least two sides. I mean, sometimes there are more sides to every issue. But if because I read, you know, only a certain set of articles, maybe one day I clicked on three news stories that were pro something, right? I don't know. Let's take something that is a non-issue in India. Let's say I clicked on three articles that is pro-life versus pro-choice, and then what happens is I'm going to keep getting articles that are pro-life. I'm going to keep getting bombarded by articles that are pro-life. Right? I might not get to see any kind of nuanced arguments in favor of pro-choice. Right? Now it's fine at maybe at my maturity level, it is okay. I know to go look for the other side of the coin, right? But what about people who are actually trying to find some information about it in the first place, and then they happen upon one way of looking at things, and then they get stuck there because the way the AI engines are built, they keep recommending, they keep showing the same kind of stories, same viewpoints to you. Like you said, confirmation bias. So that's actually a problem, right? It has been spoken about in some fora, and there are steps that companies are actually taking. Some of the companies are actually taking in order to increase what they call as diversity in their recommendation, in terms of looking at different views and so on. So, but these things are very subtle, right? So I mean, you can't do this across every possible dimension without even understanding what are all these possible dimensions that are out there, right? I'm not fear mongering here, right? I don't think I think it's an addressable issue. The only concern for me is people should first accept that this is an issue, right? So once they accept this issue, I think we can address it. And so that's something that we have to work towards as a community, as an AI community, as an educator in AI. This is something that I do everywhere. I point out all of these potential pitfalls of blindly going ahead with AI. Also, the other thing is that because of the scale at which we are making all these recommendation decisions, they are really left to the AI at the end of the day. I mean, it's just not possible. I mean, loan decisions, fine, you can have a human in the loop, right? Credit decisions, credit rating decisions, you can have a human in the loop. But this kind of news story recommendations and things like that is almost impossible to have, right? Because you're doing this for millions of customers, and then they are just continuously doing things for them. So the volume is just too much for having human through. So that's one of the reasons some of these effects get amplified.
Okay. Uh, my next question, you sort of already answered this, but these are examples I want to sort of articulate here on the show. Perhaps some of our viewers are not familiar with it.
Sure.
That artificial intelligence is not impartial or free of bias has been evidenced and documented in several cases. Our viewers, those who don't know, Amazon had discontinued its AI recruitment tool that did the job of human recruiters, but it was shown as having this deep bias against women candidates. Amazon is now reportedly, that's what Recode is reporting, bringing back the tool which has been better to guard against these biases. But hugely consequential decisions, perhaps not in India, but certainly in countries like the US, are being made using AI, like American courts using AI to decide on sentencing.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Oh, not
Yeah, yeah, the same problem. So they've actually rolled back. Yeah.
Okay. So just very briefly, sir, because we've already spoken about this, the absence of a regulatory mechanism is an issue that we need to look at, right? The fact that we cannot simply trust, for-profit enterprises to be the ones to be the sole arbiters of what is fair, or to actually say that we're going to align our goals and our technology with justice and fairness.
So let's step back. So you said AI systems were not fair. The reason that AI system, that at least in the recruitment case, was not fair, it was basically amplifying the bias that was already there in the hiring decisions made in the past. Okay, so it's not like AI somehow introduces the bias. AI systems essentially learn from the data that is given to it. Right. That's what I was telling you earlier. You give it a lot of samples, right, and then you learn from that, and then you try to generalize from that. Right. So if AI systems, for example, talking about the even as something as simple as gender of the babies, if you only give you white babies to train on, you will obviously start making mistakes on black babies. Right? So what is needed is an awareness of the dimensions along which you want to be fair. Right? Do I have to look at race? Do I have to look at skin tone? Right? Do I have to look at gender? Do I have to look at language? In India, we have so many dimensions that we can be biased on. Right? So I don't think there's a single Indian who is completely bias free. Right? So we have so many of these probably genetically trained into us now. I don't know, but the point is. There is nothing like universally you can say something is bias free. So you have to look at this in the context, in the society in which it's operating and the applications that you are looking at, right? And therefore you're going to need some amount of regulation, right? And the question is, are you going to let the companies come up with this regulation, or are you going to have a regulator who's going to come and do this? These are all challenging issues. In fact, um, so if you're going to get a regulator to come and do this, does it have to be like an international regulatory body that's going to do this? Does it have to be like an Indian body? Or I mean, like every country is going to have, every geography is going to have its own innovations. Right now, we are looking at we're struggling with all the online social media. Right, so India has its own regulations, which is not being adhered to, or which the companies are having significant difficulty adhering to in terms of data protection and the control over who's using the platform and so on and so forth. Right, all of these things become challenging. So who is going to be the regulator? So all of these issues will come in if you start thinking about coming up with AI regulations. Right. On the other hand, you have to regulate it like any other technology, any other transformative technology, right? Healthcare has regulations, right? So even if it is like or like vehicles, right, or automobiles and things like that, they have regulations in terms of safety and what kind of guarantee should be provided, things like that. So likewise, so AI needs to be regulated, but we have to be a little bit more careful. AI is not a single technology, just like we were talking about, right? So it can be narrow AI that are developed specifically to solve various problems, and the issues that are going to come up are going to be very, very different from one to the other. Right? So my usual example that I give is when you talk about decisions made by AI, right? There are certain sectors where every decision that you make, whether it is by AI or by a human, requires you to provide an explanation to the customer, right? So if you deny a loan, you have to say why you denied a loan. There has to be some causes as to why you did that. So the kind of explanations I would provide for a loan decisions are very different from the kind of explanations I'll provide for a medical diagnosis. I think about it. Right? The doctors don't have to, don't actually are not, as much legislated to give an explanation as a banker is. Right? So the AI systems that are being deployed in various situations will have to obey regulations that are similar to that. Right? So in some sense, AI regulations will be tied to the end use and end applications that they will have to serve. Right? So when you're talking about should AI be regulated without hobbling innovation, that's a question I see on my screen. AI should be regulated in some sense. The regulations will spur innovation, in my opinion, right? Because you are going to talk about individual sector based regulations, and the AI's technology will have to evolve to make sure
Right.
that they satisfy those regulations so that we can get finally something deployable, right? Something that can actually cause a change in the world, right? So that's something that we have to do. And these have to come soon. I agree with you on that.
Okay. Dr. Ravindran, is there, are there scenarios where, I don't know how to put this, like explainable AI? What is, as opposed to, this is a term again, I came across this in the course of reading about all of this, is black box AI, which is the people who sort of, created this aren't aware of the process that takes place that leads to the output. Is that, am I don't know if
No,
I'm
there is no,
mischaracterizing.
no. Yeah, I mean, it's not. I wouldn't blame you, but it's mischaracterized significantly in the literature, in the public imagination as well, right? So think about it. Let's take the example I gave you, right? So would you ask the doctor how did your brain fire? Which region of your brain turned on for you to tell me that I have cancer? When you looked at this image, what part of your brain fired so that you told me I have cancer? No way, right? Why are you putting a much larger burden on a system? What will the doctor tell you? Doctor will tell you that, hey, look, here is an x-ray, right? And or here is a scan that I have, and these are these patches in the scan which typically indicate there is something, there's a tumor in the brain or whatever, right? So this is essentially, this can be caused due to xyz. In fact, very recently I had a discussion with the doctor who was showing me an MRI scan and showing where a small bulge was, and he explained to me what is happening here and why is this causing some pain somewhere else and so on and so forth, right? That's the kind of explanation the doctor is going to give you, right? Doctor is not going to say, oh, this part of my brain said this. As far as I'm concerned, the doctor's brain is a black box to me, right? So when you're talking about explainable AI, the computation that the AI does can still be a black box. I have no problems with that. But when the AI comes and tells me that this is the decision I have made, it should give me enough reasons, just like another human who made the decision would have explained it to me. Right? So that is what the true explainable AI is in some sense, right? All these things that people talk about, looking into the black box and trying to understand how the AI makes a decision and so on and so forth, are all important for the people designing the AI system. This is like running diagnostics on a car,
Right.
right? So I need to figure out what went wrong in the car so that I can fix it, right? But you don't need to know what went wrong in the car to drive it. So there are, I mean, so for people who are using the car or who are using the AI system, the kind of explanations they need is very different. And
Right.
so for them, the AI can be a black box. So that's fine. So I think people are kind of mixing up all these issues as to what constitutes explainable AI, right? And a large fraction of the research and publications and other things that you'll find out there on explainable AI are all the ones that help the AI designer fix the system, not really the kind of explanations that are going to help the public accept the decisions that the AI is made. So there are some progress that has been made there, but we still have to do quite a bit of work in that
There's
space.
always that element of trust, isn't there, with the
Element of
people who
trust.
are.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So for the trust, you need that explanation to come out, and it has to be in a language that a layperson understands. It doesn't have to be saying that, okay, this portion of my brain fired kind of explanations. Yeah.
Right. I've taken more time than I told you I would, so I'm just going to try and rush through the rest of it. And I want to ask you this because I, as a reporter, have covered the criminal justice system for a very long time, and I know the
Mhm.
failings of it as most people would. So I know this particular anxiety that is there among rights activists over the particular use of facial recognition technology in policing. We have you have also spoken about efficiency, how and we know how overburdened the criminal justice system is, and many are saying this is going to be a progressive tool. So I just want to know your own take on this use of facial recognition technology in policing.
I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea. I'll primarily, even though contrary to the claims made by the companies that sell these facial recognition products, right? I don't think we are at a point where I can guarantee 100% or even 99% that the decisions made by my facial recognition system are right. So even take a simple case like identity verification. I come to the system, I declare that I am Ravindran, and then I ask the system to verify that I am Ravindran or not. Right? Even that is not. I mean, that is pretty robust, right? Because you're not trying to find me from like a million customer base, right? I'm just taking images corresponding to one individual and trying to compare it with the camera images that you're seeing now. Right? Even that is not completely robust, right? Contrary to all claims. It's possible to even beat that. This is why I'm the DigiYatra thing. I really want to test out DigiYatra, but for whatever reason, it doesn't allow me to register. But but yeah, it is a little scary. Having said that, facial recognition technology has advanced way beyond what it was, like even 5 years back. Right? So people have, that is a progression here. So at some point of time, maybe you can allow facial recognition technology to make independent decisions. But right now, I think it's okay on things where the cost of failure is slightly low. In opening your eye, if I don't recognize your face now, maybe you can turn like this, or something. Maybe occasionally it works for your brother who looks somewhat like you. Right? That's okay. Cost of failure is not that high unless you are having some national secrets in your phone. Uh, but um, but in other cases, I would still not completely trust facial recognition system. If you want to use it for law enforcement, you should do it with abundance of. It should be very much a simple tool in the toolbox of a human investigator or a human policeman. It cannot be something that independently drives decision. The technology is not there yet. Maybe a few years down the line, even that I'm not sure. But at least right now, the technology is not there.
Okay. This is truly the final question, Dr. Ravindran, and everybody's favorite question. How close are we to AI potentially being sentient or human like? Or I know because I'm sure you saw the conversation that the New York Times reporter had with the chatbot and, the response that came from Sydney. I'm talking about Sydney, the response of Sydney to.
My God, is that the bar for sentience?
Well, that's
I mean, going off the rails and becoming paranoid. Is that the bar for sentience? Oh, come on. Anyway. So the point is, I kept telling you, what does Sydney do? Sydney takes text that was generated in the past and tries to generate new text. And now what is happening is, this guy has been having this conversation with Sydney for about 2 hours, and you feed this very long conversation of 2 hours and ask it, hey, what is going to come later, right? And then Sydney completely goes off the rails because it doesn't have too much experience looking at those kinds of things. And then it just goes on, maybe there is so much too many mushy things out there, there is just too many Mills and Boons novels out there on the web and say, "Hey, come on, leave your husband, come with me," or whatever. Right? These things are just noise, right? It's not sentience. That's why I'm saying if the bar for sentience becomes how much noise you can generate when you speak, then I'm really worried. So first of all, we do not have a mathematical definition of what sentience is, right? It kind of boils down to, yeah, you show me, I'll know it. If I see it, I'll know it, but I can't tell you what it is, right? And those things are certainly nothing that can be computed right now. At this point of time, I don't know what sentience is. I can't compute it. And anything that's not computable cannot be implemented in a computer. Remember, at the end of the day, an AI is a piece of software, regardless of what people, what kind of things that you attribute to it, right? So how much ever humans behavior and human feelings you attribute to as AI, it's at the end of the day still the software. And until you can't give me a characterization of what sentience is or what consciousness is, and so on and so forth, we don't implement it. And some people say that it's going to be an emergent behavior, blah blah blah, and things like that. But we are nowhere close to building an AI that is sentient or that is conscious, and that has its needs, that's driven by its own needs and self-actuated, and all that. No, AI is still a piece of software, and maybe I don't know. I can't say what happened 100 years down the line, but right now we are not nowhere close.
Okay. On that note, sir, thank you so much for the abundance of clarity you've sort of given us on all these subjects. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.